I'd like to call this special meeting to order. If you would all rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Posey, would you call the roll?
Yes, Madam Supervisor. Trustee Bussino?
Here.
Trustee Nevers?
Present.
Trustee Oliver?
Here.
Trustee Smith? Here. Treasurer Goodhue?
Here.
Clerk Posey here. Supervisor Dunn.
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you. Next, we have the approval of the agenda. Are there any additions, corrections to the agenda?
Madam Chair, I just have a question on agenda item number 3. Before we approve this agenda and go forward, since we do have some new legal minds with us tonight, and welcome to our community, by the way. Wish you were here under different circumstances, to be quite honest. But I do want you to be aware, and I need you to answer some questions before I can approve this agenda. And my concerns are consistent with every time that we have had to go into closed session for the last couple of years. Our board has had issues with this in the past, and I have done my due diligence over the years to make sure we don't repeat past mistakes. Consistent with the way I've been up here, as you may or may not be aware, we were found in violation by a Macomb County judge of the Open Meetings Act for inappropriately going into closed session. This is why I ask a lot of questions. My concern is with the reason why we're ending closed session. Namely, it has been articulated to this board through the agenda that we're trying to enter the very narrow window of permissible reasons going into closed session under MCL 15.268H. When we were going into closed session for this exact same reason a few meetings ago, I had some questions for our general counsel at the time. Okay, Madam Chair, can I ask Mr. Yotis to come up and answer these questions for us, since we have retained him as one of our attorneys?
Certainly. Mr. Yotis?
Yes, Mr. Yotis, I just got a couple of questions, and again, in fairness to me, you're newer to our community. The legal opinion that's going to be read to us in closed session, would it be foiable if it was sent by email, the same legal opinion?
Maybe I can help short circuit some of this,
Okay.
but we intend to make it public, for public consumption, the document. So, yep, I think that's better than foiable. We'll have it here for the public
Okay, so are we,
now.
okay. Okay. So, my question is though, so if it's going to be open to the public, then it's not attorney-client privilege?
We decided that it's more important to be as transparent as possible and have all this information out. So we talked about it. I think that it certainly could have been attorney-client privilege. I believe there was every reason to believe that we had every right to keep it privileged, but after some serious discussion about the public's concern and the seriousness of the issue, a decision was made to make it public.
What's going to be read to us is going to be an illegal opinion under attorney-client privilege only, right? We're not discussing how we're going to go forward with tonight.
There will
correct?
be discussion in closed session that will
About your legal opinion, right?
yes, that will be attorney-client privilege.
Again, I don't mean to put you on the spot. It's consistent with, I've challenged us going in, I've sat out of a closed session before.
Sure.
So I have to be very consistent with who I am up here tonight because it's a sensitive topic. So that's what you are giving us a legal opinion, written legal opinion, legal advice in closed session.
Correct. Now, the written document will be provided to the public.
Okay. That's it.
Okay. Madam Chair,
Yes.
I too have a question. In paragraph 3 of Mr. Meehan's letter dated February 18th, 2020, he said the evaluation process used was selected by the board as the best method to acquire appropriate reviews. To my immediate recollection, there was no vote to evaluate. There was a vote to evaluate, but not by anonymous evaluations, not by that process. Now, that's what I believe. And the board only speaks through its actions at meetings. There are no minutes of any such action as far as I know. Accordingly, this statement is either a complete misrepresentation or a direct admission of a violation of the Open Meetings Act, because the board would have had to meet to make a decision outside of a normal meeting. That's all I have to say.
If I may, and I can't speak for Mr. Meehan, it's my understanding he'll be here later, but my understanding of the development was that our supervisor, Janet Dunn, thought that an evaluation would be appropriate. So that was my understanding.
Madam Chair, I just want to clarify, my questions were only about closed session, not the process in general. I just want to make sure that we're protected going to closed session, which again, in fairness to me, is very consistent with me over the years that I've had concerns with closed session, so.
And if I may, just to be clear, his letter indicated the board
Right.
decided.
Right.
And I'm a part of that board. I never voted for anonymous evaluations would be used to evaluate Mr. Sardi's performance.
And again, I don't know why that was said, but why that
That's
was
just
mentioned that way.
part of the record.
Madam Chair, if I may, I disagree with that statement. We gathered into closed session and there was discussion had. The supervisor brought up a sample evaluation that could be utilized. It was discussed amongst the board how we would approach it. It was indicated that we were going to address the members that signed that letter, and that the only way we felt that they would give us an honest evaluation is if it were anonymous, because of the fear of retaliation. That was discussed in the room, and the motion that was read coming out was that the supervisor was to execute the evaluation as discussed. I would hope that other board members that were in that same discussion would support what I recall from, or recollect from that discussion.
Madam Chair, that's exactly how
I'm sorry.
that's exactly how it went.
Thank you. Ms.
Madam
Goodhue.
Chair.
I'm confused because then after that meeting, Mrs. Dunn, you sent out an email to the board members asking how it should be done and wanted our opinions. And I know I went upstairs and talked to you personally about these evaluations. So I'm not sure if we made the motion to do it, why you would have sent that email out to all the board members asking. And I know Mrs. Nevers also went up and talked to you about a different way how to do an evaluation. So I'm a little confused.
And yes, if I may, and I don't mean to interrupt, but I remember, and I believe, Janet, you will remember, I spoke to you about how I thought something like that would be very unfair. And I talked to you about a process that I thought would be really a good way to go about evaluating anybody. And that would be to allow the person to be evaluated to give goals and objectives at the beginning of a year or whatever, and then at the end of that process, once they were evaluated, these were their own goals, their own objectives, and you could use that as a blueprint for how to say, well, hey, you said this was a goal, and you didn't accomplish that, and so forth. And I remember distinctly you saying that you liked that, and you thought it was a valid idea.
In my opinion, Madam Chair, I think we're talking about two different conversations. I think the conversation you referred to, Nancy, was the employees in general. I don't think we ever had that conversation, even though we talked in closed session for quite a long time how to perform an evaluation on our HR General Counsel. I don't think we ever came up with the goals for him. I think that was the employees when we were going through negotiations with AFSCME.
Absolutely, but this was a suggestion because Janet sent out a note and needed help with this or ideas or whatever. That's when I went to her and I said, hey, this seems like a fair idea to me. I'm not mixing the two. And yes, during negotiations, we did talk about that, so you're right there as well.
Madam Chair, if I remember right, we did discuss what Ms. Nevers said prior to going into closed session. If I remember right, we talked in closed session about how we didn't want the employees to have to sign their name to it because I don't think they would be honest with what they put down or would feel uncomfortable what they were writing down. I do remember Ms. Nevers talking about it prior to going into closed session, was throwing, I think a lot of people were throwing some ideas around, even in closed session. As an employee, I wouldn't want to put my name onto something in fear of retaliation.
Well,
I
my
wouldn't have
last
voted for
statement
that.
would be, I believe if you have a conviction and you believe in that conviction, state it. You don't have to do things anonymously. And all of these employees are protected by the union, so they could grieve anything, if they felt something was unfair. There's a checks and a balance on that. These are just my thoughts and my opinions, but.
And Madam Chair, I do not think the employees have had the route to where they have felt comfortable for years expressing their opinions on that.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the agenda items as presented.
Motion by Ms. Posey,
Support.
supported by Ms. Smith. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by saying nay.
Nay.
That motion carries. Next, we have public comments, and that is on agenda items only. If you want to speak, please come to the podium and state your name. You have 3 minutes.
Jim Jellius, item 5. As a reminder, when you debate this item, let's not forget the resignations of the planning director and purchasing specialist last year, plus a letter signed by 22 management employees submitted to the board, all of which cited the same problem, that a conflict of interest does exist with one person serving in a dual role, HR legal, employment position. This clearly indicates a change is needed. To quote a passage from the planning director's resignation letter, quote, "There is a distinct disconnect between the department heads, board members, and HR legal counsel. The relationship is devolving into a conquer and control atmosphere rather than a congenial partnership. The public is not served by this dysfunctional and unnecessary report. Not a single department head has indicated they are satisfied with this status quo. The current arrangement with these two functions under one person is simply not working." Excuse me, end quote. Then 22 township management employees submitted a letter to this board citing the same problems with this dual role position. I quote a passage from that letter as a reminder, quote, "It has been demonstrated that the performance of the essential job duties in these important roles has been diminished since you instituted it in 2017. The combination of the HR director and in-house legal counsel has at times presented a conflict of interest," end quote. This issue should have been dealt with long before now. The board should recognize that all these people involved in this are highly trained, intelligent, and valuable employees trying to do what's best in their respective roles in serving the residents. I know, I worked with them for 14 years. My opinion has never changed. I believe we should have a separate HR director and legal counsel. I also suggest a new law firm is in order. These changes would go a long way in fixing the mistakes of the past and would show the residents you are willing to get this township back on the right track. It's time to do the right thing without delay.
Good evening, John Parkinson, address is on file at the clerk's office. And Ms. Dunn, if you'll indulge me, I will get to the items 4 and 5. However, I've got a comment to make. Ms. Dunn, many times through the years, you have been asked by residents to resign. You have failed to protect the township to serve the residents you were elected to. Your position started with a scandal and most likely will end with a scandal. To you and any member who sits on the board, if you have wronged me, my family, or the residents you serve, I forgive you. However, it doesn't make it right.
Mr. Parkinson.
Hold on, Ms. Dunn, if you just bear with me, I'll get there. I'm gonna get there.
Parkinson, this is not about me.
I understand that. I want to ask one question, and then I'll get to the items 4 and 5. All right, you know what? Let me get to my point. If Mr. Assorti is a just cause employee and not an at-will employee, he was not written up, to the best of our knowledge. Is that not the process for a just cause employee? At-will employee would have been, you would have been, in your right authority to do so by forcing him to resign or whatever you did. Or, however, being a just cause employee, if he's not been written up, we feel that you may have made an error which will cost the township thousands, if not millions of dollars. And I have one question for you, Ms. Dunn. We, the residents, deserve to know the answer. Did you or did you not take money from Dino Bucci?
This is not about me.
I understand that.
Then sit down.
Good evening. I'm Sal DeCarlo, the Parks and Rec Director, but tonight I'm here representing AFSCME Local 1917, the management union. I'd like to address agenda items 3 and 4. There's been a number of comments made both publicly and privately by Mrs. Nevers and Mrs. Goodhue about our union in relation to Mr. Assorti's employment. The insinuation that the union is attacking Mr. Assorti because of the past year's contract negotiations is untrue with no basis in fact. We approached this board back in 2016 to urge you not to combine the HR and legal positions. We told you then that it would be a terrible idea, and time has proven it to be just that. We negotiated numerous contracts with former HR Director John Brogowitz, some during hard economic times where our union had to take concessions. We had no problems whatsoever with Mr. Brogowitz, the township, or the process. If we had no problems then, we certainly have no problems now. The combining of the two positions was an experiment that was wrong from the beginning. It appears that most of the current board now realizes this error and they're trying to correct the mistake. Our union appreciates your efforts to right the ship. To the minority who still believe that Mr. Assorti is doing a good job and is being attacked, we're amazed by your lack of awareness. You are refusing to do the job that you were elected to do. 22 out of 23 members of your management union signed a letter telling you that you had a problem. It was your obligation to investigate that problem. Mrs. Nevers, you stated on camera on May 22nd and then again on September 11th that you would meet with everyone who signed that letter. Now, 9 months later, at the last meeting, you backpedaled and said you only had to meet with the people whom you needed to get their input. The others, you said, you pretty much knew how they felt about Mr. Assorti. Well, would it not be important to ask the people that if you assume that you knew how they felt, why they felt that way? As a part-time trustee, we would have hoped you would have listened to the people who are here day in and day out doing the work. Instead, you were manipulated once again to listen to the views of one over the views of many. As for you, Mrs. Goodhue, you were here every day. For you not to address the concerns related to Mr. Assorti's performance or lack of it in many situations is a testament to poor leadership. You met with very few of our members, and the only difference is you didn't publicly state it twice the way Mrs. Nevers did. The two of you have let these employees down. The facts cannot be denied. The combining of these two positions was a mistake and benefited the township in no way. Our membership was asked to do evaluations on Mr. Assorti. They were done honestly and objectively. After your reviews of the evaluations tonight, I'm sure you'll clearly see that Mr. Assorti has failed in every aspect of his job. The members of AFSCME Union 1917 strongly urge you to correct this mistake and dissolve the HR legal contract. Thank you.
Anyone else? Very well. I have a statement to make. Due to the insinuations made by employee number 2205 that I am acting out of retaliation to a correspondence that he sent to the board. I am therefore recusing myself from any action or discussion on agenda item number 4 to avoid any appearance of conflict. Based on that, I am asking board members at this time to appoint a different chair for the rest of this meeting.
Board members, being the fact that Ms. Dunn is recusing herself from this, from agenda item 4, I would make a motion to have Clerk Posey chair this agenda item.
Support.
Motion by Ms. Smith, supported by Mr. Oliver, to appoint Ms. Posey as the chair for the remainder of the meeting. Would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Madam Supervisor. Trustee Smith?
Yes.
Trustee Oliver?
Yes.
Trustee Bucino?
Yes.
Trustee Nevers?
Abstain.
Treasurer Goodhue?
Yes.
Clerk Posey, yes. That motion carries.
Very well.
Very well. The agenda item next on the agenda is number 3, which is entering into closed session for attorney-client confidential closed session meeting to discuss the independent evaluation of employee 2205, closed session per MCL 15.268 subsection H. Can I have a motion for closed session?
So moved to go into closed session.
Support. Support.
Motion by trustee Oliver, supported by trustee Smith to go into closed session. I'll call a roll call. Trustee Oliver?
Yes.
Trustee Smith?
Yes.
Trustee Bucino?
Yes.
Trustee Nevers?
Yes.
Treasurer Goodhue?
Yes.
And Clerk Posey, yes. We're adjourned to closed session. I'd like to call this meeting back to order. We are returning from closed session. It is 7:50. We have come out of closed session with regards to our attorney-client confidential closed session meeting to discuss the independent evaluation of employee 2205. Is there any motions at this time?
Well, could I make a correction? You didn't discuss the evaluation. You discussed the legal memorandum that you had received
Okay,
from Mr. Dean Yotis. There was no evaluation discussed in closed session.
okay. So we discussed the legal memorandum from Attorney Dean Yotis. And at this time, do I have a motion with regards to the legal memorandum?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion to waive attorney-client privilege for the confidential, for the memorandum that was just presented to us in closed session.
Support.
I have a motion by trustee Bucino, supported by trustee Smith, to waive the attorney-client privilege on the legal memorandum that was received this evening from Attorney Dean Yotis. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. That motion carries.
And then would you also make a motion that the legal memorandum is received in the record for the purposes of what we're doing here today?
Would someone entertain that motion, please?
Madam Chair, I will make the motion that the confidential,
Legal memorandum.
legal memorandum is put into record for what we are doing here tonight.
We have a motion by trustee Smith,
Support.
supported by trustee Oliver, to make the legal memorandum a part of the record this evening. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries.
All right, board members, the next thing that you do then is you are now at the stage where you have received the legal memorandum from Counsel Yotis, and I understand he is still going to be here. You have also received the performance evaluations, which I would like also to make sure you get them entered into the record. And this would be the board's opportunity, as led by the chair, to discuss the findings, thoughts, comments, things that you found that were relevant, important, or things that you think need to be discussed amongst yourselves.
Members of the board, I'd like to open the floor for discussion on item number 4 at this time.
Okay. Madam Chair, as far as the evaluations are concerned for me, and I almost feel emotional about it because once I think the board has read these evaluations, and to me, it would be very hard to put in words what some of these people have put in words, and I wish I knew then what I know now. And throughout the whole evaluations that you will read, that will bullying, toxic, harassing, you know, besides not getting things done or and all of that. I haven't been here as long as most of the board members are concerned. I mean, I witnessed in closed session going over the table at a trustee where other trustee members had to tell him to stop. And when I got out of the meeting, I said, is this normal? And they said, yes, this isn't normal. It's just not normal. And I don't want to go any further.
Thank you, Trustee Smith. Anyone else?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'm going to take a little bit different route here. There's a lot to look through, and I think it's important to note to the public, since this is not attorney-client privilege anymore, you're going to see more than just the evaluations in the memorandum that was given to us. You are going to see other documentation, but reading everything, all the evaluations, I'm concerned that I believe that there are federal and state laws and regulations that govern the relationship of the township and the employees that have not been followed, which was part of the contract we had with our HR general counsel. I believe there are some federal and state directives that were handed down that affected the safety of employees that were not addressed by our HR director. That, again, I believe is a violation of the contract that he had with the board, with the entire board of Macomb Township. And I also believe that in the agreement, there was a promise made that he would take appropriate disciplinary action to ensure consistent and appropriateness of discipline, and I don't feel that he has done that. So I am taking more of the route of things that I see in his contract that he has not lived up to.
Thank you, Trustee Bussino. Any other members?
Yeah, I got it.
Madam Chair, if I may, I put together some thoughts. Granted, I'm a trustee part-time, and I never witnessed bullying or any of the things that I read, and I read every single one of those of the evaluations. But I would just like to read, these were my thoughts. I'm sure everybody will disagree with me, but I need to say them. Okay, and I'd like to start with certain facts for the people in the audience and any new board members that aren't aware of this. In the past, Mr. Kays, who is the deceased former clerk, and John Brogowitz, the retired Human Resource Director, handled the negotiations for AFSCME Local 917.43, the Salaried Employee Management Union. To me, that seemed inappropriate because essentially Mr. Kays was negotiating a contract for his own clerk department employees, along with the rest of the AFSCME salary employees. And I'm sure the employees were very comfortable with that arrangement. Then we fast forward, and latest negotiations were handled by Mr. Assorti, who, of course, his primary duty and focus was to the township. That's what he focused on. And so I'm sure you've all, or many here have heard this before, but I feel the need to say it. From the beginning, negotiations started out very contentious, to say the least, with the union's demand what I believe was a flawed strategy. It was a huge increase that they wanted. Now, our negotiating team consisted of Mr. Bussino, Mrs. Goodhue, Mr. Assorti, and myself. And we were all shocked at the things that were being demanded, and there was a major impasse from that point on. The negotiations continued for weeks at that impact. Mr. Assorti brought in a mediator, but the impasse continued. In an effort to move the needle, here was a wall. Mr. Assorti wanted to take and deviate from what was being talked about at that wall. So he asked our finance person to take a look at healthcare actuaries. And at the current time, our employees receive Cadillac healthcare benefits at no cost. The mere mention of those actuaries had a chilling effect, I believe, that the union settled like that. They agreed. We were shocked at how quickly they came to the table and how quickly they settled. And I believe the mere mention of those actuaries was the genesis of the action that they took against Mr. Assorti. And it followed with three things that happened. First, the petition signed by all of the members. And the second one was the grievance by a human resource individual. And that grievance was investigated by an outside lawyer, and that lawyer completely exonerated Mr. Assorti. And then the third fact was the same employees who signed that initial petition were tasked with evaluating Mr. Assorti's job performance. And now those evaluations are being used to make the case for firing Mr. Assorti. This fact alone, to me, is unfair on every level. And I now consider these three fact patterns to be intentional acts. So, those three fact patterns listed above, to me, are clear evidence that the management employees, in conjunction with some board members, have worked to set up Mr. Assorti for a firing and would be in violation of the Whistleblower Act. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I just want to respectfully just respond just to one little bit of piece of that. And because this isn't about us up here, but I just want to make sure that when any board member is speaking tonight, and this board has addressed me on this, that we do not use the word we, that we use I when you're speaking tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Nevers. Any other board member wish to speak?
Yeah, I got a couple things to say. Most of these employees, I see them on sometime a weekly basis. I grew up with them, watched their kids grow up in the community. And when Mr. Assorti come to be employed, I was not even in favor of that, because I remember that when we had two separate, we had Mr. Dolosky for our legal, and we also had John Brogwitz for our HR. And I still knew them same people, and I never heard these style of complaints. So as time goes on, I was on the planning board, and I would hear little things. And at first, as an employer myself, you don't know for sure. Maybe it's disgruntled. Maybe somebody didn't make it to work on time and was written up for it, so they're complaining about it. That's standard. But as time went on, these things kept getting more intense and more intense. And this is stuff you hear when you just talk to people. I wasn't a board member. I couldn't do nothing about it. But my eyes really opened the night that Mr. Maher resigned. And whether this board realized it or the residents realized it, we lost a great planner for this community. And And when I watched, I think probably 22 of the department heads or whoever come up and spoke, that took a lot because Mr. Sorty was still employed. And that took a lot for them people to come up here and say that. That generally don't happen in workplaces. You'll hear one or two come up and complain, but almost the whole staff come up. And then I get to the point where, then I get appointed by the board. Then I get the point where I could read these evaluations. And I gotta tell you, to the residents, to this board, to read the stuff I read is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking that it went on and it continued to go on for so many years. And as you read these, even if you tried to get somebody to script these aren't scripted. These come out of people's hearts and how they really felt at the end of the day. And for me as an employer, and even to our staff in this township, as this was going on, these people worked every single day and worked hard. They took care of the complaints. They took care of the counters. Our fire department ran to every fire and took care of, kept us protected. Our police department kept us protected. They didn't waver one bit. They still continue to go on. So for me to read these and now be an employer as a board member, I just feel just terrible about this, that this actually was allowed to go this far. In my business, we rely on employees. I grew up with employees as a young man. When I was 18, my father told me, you take care of the labor. And I did. But I learned real quick from my father and my grandfather that if you have bad employees, your business will do bad. You take care of your employees, number one. That's first and foremost. And I feel we didn't do that here. I feel we failed. And that's all I got to say. I feel bad this happened. I really do. So that's all I can say right now. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Trustee Oliver, I think that was perfect. Thank you.
That wasn't scripted. That was out of my heart. I just.
That was perfect.
Yeah, and I'm sad this happened. I really am.
So am I.
I think there's
the
enough
whole
board members that.
I think the board.
Yeah, feel the same way. So, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Oliver. Any other board members wishes to speak?
Yes. As a board member, we have to make many moral decisions. And some of those decisions are like throwing a pebble in the water and they spread. It's a rippling effect. Mr. Meehan told us to vote from our heart. I'm going to stand by my standards of what I feel is right, and what is wrong. Thank you.
As you should.
So
Members
this-
of the board, Mr. Meehan, but
Yeah,
I would like the opportunity to talk.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Just because I'm chairing, I still want to talk. So I can say as a full-time board member, and from the very start, I had two board members out of 5 were here when this agreement was agreed to. And when we got this agreement, we received it at probably a half an hour before a meeting, and we're expected to vote on it. At that time, 2 of us had very little interaction with Mr. Assorti, or employee 2205, and we had very little experience working with him. But we had a lot of issues with the agreement, and we brought these issues to the forefront. And although there were several issues we had with the agreement, 3 of the main concerns that we had were just cause, combining the 2 full-time positions, thinking it would probably be too much for one individual to handle, and the professional flexibility clause, which allowed the employee to provide legal services to other clients while holding 2 full-time positions in the township. Our concerns were not considered, and we were completely disregarded. Now we fast forward 3 years, and all of our concerns come full circle. It is not unusual for municipalities to change with law firms and to have a change of heart or decide they want to try something different. And that usually requires it to go before the board and a vote of 4, and that change happens. That's it. It's that simple. Ours, we didn't have that luxury because we had the just cause in this agreement, which is what we brought to the attention of the board at that time. Also, many of the comments indicated in these evaluations was a concern of timeliness, poor communication, lack of communication skills. I could only assume that has a lot to do with one person holding 2 full-time positions. So, or possibly because they had the ability to still work with other municipalities while working 2 full-time positions. But these were brought to the forefront, and 2 members tried to have the board address these things before it became an agreement signed by the board, and it didn't happen. So if any action happens to this tonight, it is the result of the board members that agreed to this agreement in the very beginning. These things should have been addressed. I had no relationship with this employee at the time. I had no experience working with him, but I knew there was issues with this contract, and here we are tonight. Some of the comments that these evaluations represent, I experienced myself. One of them has poor communication skills. I can agree with that. His numerous displays of bad temper are unprofessional. I've experienced that. Quickly becomes combative when not agreed with. I've experienced that numerous times. Worst climate I have been associated with in my 29 years in a municipality. I have had 3 HR managers, including John Brogowitz, and I have had a friendly, warm, and professional relationship with all of them except for this employee. Same kind of climate, I would say, exists. This employee has a short fuse. I've witnessed it numerous times, and so have other trustees witnessed it, and employees witnessed it expressed towards me. Completing tasks on time is not a priority. I can say I've witnessed that a lot. Quick temper with staff and even public at times. I've witnessed that. He has demonstrated on numerous occasions that he is untrustworthy. For this reason, I have great concern regarding him handling any sensitive HR matter. I have heard him discuss in meetings personal information regarding employees that only the HR director should be privy to. I am also uncomfortable referring staff to him for HR expertise. Since its hiring, I feel that we have lost the element of the HR department that used to serve as a resource for our employees. He has shown disrespect and insubordination to board members. He has also shown disrespect to department heads, all level of staff, and community members. In my observation, he is especially disrespectful to females. I would agree with that. He has also allowed the board members or meetings to become unprofessional. He gives no advice on parliamentary procedure or how to run a meeting. He has also allowed or even encouraged the board to violate the OMA. The township never had these types of spectacles when Larry Delaski was the attorney. I can agree with that statement. He pits employees against each other and pits employees against the board in an attempt to cover up his incompetence. I have experienced that. I've experienced he has zero respect for employees. He believes that he is above every other employee when he is supposed to be a department head. He has little to no respect for several board members and treats females poorly and talks down to them as if he is superior to them. So these, as Mr. Oliver expressed, were extremely disheartening to read. But unfortunately, it's been going on. I have brought it to the supervisor's attention. I have brought it to this board's attention numerous times. Nobody wanted to hear of it. And I guess if you don't hear it or see it, it doesn't exist. But it did exist, and it does exist. Just to put it into a summary, the evaluation had 2 categories. It was organization and professional standards, management and leadership standards. For exceeds expectations under organization and professional standards, he received a 6. Meets expectations, 16. Struggles to achieve performance standards, 36. Does not achieve performance standards, 108. And 14 were not applicable. management and leadership standards, exceeds expectations 5, meets expectations 17, struggles to achieve performance standards 21, and does not achieve performance standards 119. So to say that all of that resulted from negotiations would be very difficult, in my opinion, to believe. I believe that there have been department heads that have expressed dissatisfaction in service well before negotiations started. That is my opinion of this evening, and that from my heart, I have fought tirelessly for the employees and for myself as a board member to not accept this behavior as professional or acceptable in the township. That's all I have to say.
Madam Chairperson, at this point in time, I would ask that,
I think I'm going to make a motion,
Not
if
yet.
that's okay. Not yet?
not yet, no.
Okay.
I would ask that if there are any of the board members, after having received and reviewed the legal memorandum and the exhibits and documents and letters that are attached to that, and after reviewing the performance evaluations that you've been provided, are there any questions that you wish to get further clarification from either myself as the interim or today the attorney for you, for the township, or Mr. Yotis, and I'm trying to see if I can find his face somewhere, that you wish to address to him at this point in time in the public? Okay, since there's none of that, you do have a public here, and I think that it would be appropriate for the public, if they wish to speak, to provide any information, whether it's on behalf of Mr. 2205, or wish to voice their own issues, or wish to make neutral comments in any nature. This would be their opportunity to do so that you can fully consider the decision you will make next.
I'm confused in that piece. I didn't see that piece coming. What? I'm sorry, Madam Chair. What, the public's going to add to a disciplinary hearing? Can you just explain it to me? I'm confused at this
This is
point.
the opportunity, if you don't want to
But
have
this
it,
is a
sir.
disciplinary hearing of the, why would
Not
the,
a disciplinary hearing, sir.
okay.
Okay?
All right, okay, all right.
This were a disciplinary hearing, then.
I'm
there'll
just
be
surprised that the public's coming up now. I'm not saying I disagree, I didn't know this piece was coming, so go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Western. I have lived in Macomb Township for over 20 years, and my experience with all of the departments of Macomb Township and the dozens of employees I've interacted with as a homeowner and a resident and someone who participates in the activities has always been positive. Terrific employees. And even on difficult days, they treat the public with respect. They treat each other with respect. They stop what they're doing, no matter how busy you can see they are, to assist people. I also could relate to some of the comments that you're reading from the employees about the behavior and attitude of this person toward a member of the public. I think that many of you have had to observe Mr. Assorti engaging residents after the board meetings, after the cameras are off, either in this room or in the parking lot, to challenge them, particularly if they were to come to the podium and speak. At least one of those resulted in a resident filing a report with the sheriff's department, with a witness statement by a trustee. And it's a pretty high level of concern. My own experience was one evening after I had talked during public comment and the meeting was over and the camera was off, and I was seated in the audience, and Mr. Assorti walked from the dais into the audience, waded down a row of seats, to position himself directly in front of me where I was still seated. And he proceeded to berate me for my comments and to tell me what I could and could not say during public comments. I came to my feet. He's face to face with me, and he's continuing. I told him what I believed they were saying was not true. And I walked out to the middle aisle to move away from him, and he followed me to the middle aisle to continue that. I finally asked for someone to come over and please videotape this. I couldn't believe it was going on. And another resident did come over, started videotaping him, and engaged him in a verbal conversation to get it to stop. That's just one experience that I had, but if any employee here had treated a resident like that, I'm sure that you would have been alarmed. I see that my time is up, so I will leave it at that, but I thank you for the consideration you're giving to this issue tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, board members. Charles Pierce, employee and part of the last 3 negotiating teams. Had not been my intent to speak at all. However, the comments that were made by Trustee Nevers, I think, have to be addressed. First and foremost, regardless of your feelings of who was on the negotiating team, these contracts go back many years, prior to my even being employed here. Supervisor Brennan sat in on those contracts. The inference as made that is 2 people were able to manipulate several board members over 20 plus years of contracts to benefit the clerk's office or other employees here, and that these 7 people sitting up there were not intelligent enough to do their due diligence in their own homework based upon what was reported to them by the members representing you in those union negotiations is blatantly false and foolish. In no way, shape, or form can or should you believe that that was the case. And none of those contracts ever, in the contract previous to my coming here, was it an exorbitant benefit to the employees. Many concessions were made. And I'm sure some of you who had taken your time and done your homework would realize that. In any negotiations, there are contentious times that arise. But to make the blanket statement that it was all one-sided and we were the only ones who did it is an error and wrong and a misrepresentation of the facts. There were things that were talked about and supposed to be brought by both sides, and we, more often than not, came prepared and had that information where we were told we could expect reciprocal information from the employee in question, and we did not receive it. And that aided and abetted in the contentious atmosphere in that room at that time. Thank you.
At that time, this was your time, board?
Okay, I'm sorry.
Or less, I'm sorry, I didn't know there was another individual. Excuse me, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, Mark Grabo, former supervisor. Charlie, I appreciate your words. Christy, your words. Tim, your words. Kathy, yours. Karen, I haven't heard exactly where you stand, but I have an opinion that I think I know. Ms. Nevers, I think I'm very clear in yours. Board, I'm ashamed that this has been allowed to transpire. Everyone, and please, the people that weren't here, you guys are well aware of yourselves. The new trustees, you guys are well aware of yourselves because this transpired before and it was hooskowed into you. Your supervisor had a responsibility to provide a safe working environment. Your supervisor has failed to do that. There are legal actions for that. Your supervisor, along with your attorney, led you down a path that violated the law. I know that fact because I took you to task for that and won in front of a judge. What part have we not painted the clear picture this was not the best choice. You've got every member of management staff. I can't even think straight. It makes me sick to hear these things that you individuals have been able to read. Charlie, I hear it in your voice. Kathy, you can't even bring it forward because it's so egregious. Christy, you read them. How can you read? It makes me ill to hear that these individuals that I worked with, that I know, that I had a duty to require to protect them at their job and their environment. If it was brought forward to me, this individual should have been long gone early on. I cannot believe we've allowed this to transpire within this township. This is an absolute shame. What part are we not holding our head in embarrassment? How long have we allowed this to transpire? You've got good people that have left. Shame on us. Shame on us. Shame on you, Mrs. Dunn, for allowing this to happen. This is not a political game. This is the truth. What you've done is illegal and can be answered in the court of law.
So the board, would you pull that back, and then, Chairman, would you make a determination of whether or not there be a motion to be made based upon the evidence?
Yes. Members of the board, would anyone like to entertain a motion if there is just cause for discipline of 2205?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion that this board has found just cause for the discipline of employee number 2205.
Motion made by trustee Bustineau,
Support.
supported by trustee Oliver, that just cause for discipline of employee number 2205 does exist. All in favor signify.
No, can you please do a roll call?
Sure. I'd like to call a roll call. Trustee Bustineau,
Yes.
trustee Oliver,
Yes.
trustee Nevers,
No.
trustee Smith,
Yes.
treasurer Goodhue,
No.
and clerk Posey, yes. The motion carries.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Then there's
Is
one
it
more
yours?
motion. as to
Okay.
what
Being
the-
that the board found just cause for discipline of employee 2205, I would like to ask the board if there's a motion to indicate what is the appropriate discipline up to and including discharge at this time.
Yes, Madam Chair, I would find that the appropriate discipline of employee 2205 is termination of employment effective immediately.
Motion by trustee Bustineau,
Support.
supported by trustee Oliver, that the appropriate discipline for employee 2205 is discharge termination effective immediately. Trustee Bustineau,
Yes.
trustee Oliver,
Yes.
trustee Nevers,
No.
trustee Smith,
Yes.
treasurer Goodhue,
No.
clerk Posey, yes. That motion carries.
So at this point in time, you've concluded.
Madam Chair, I don't find pleasure in terminating anyone. I'm just,
And Madam Chair, if I may, people will wonder why the no vote. But I believe in my heart that human nature is such that people are self-interested. I know we have wonderful employees. I've never had an issue with one of them. They are professional, they are competent, but what I have to say is difficult. But when I see injustice, I must say one thing. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and that's a quote from Martin Luther King. I hope people understand my position. I don't know if they will, but I did not see what was in all of those documents. I read them, but I didn't see that action happening when I was here.
So at this point in time, you would move on to your next item, but because of, and for the public, because there are certain rights that employee 2205 has to request a opportunity to present his side, that is what is called a Loudermilk hearing. I would ask that you adjourn the final item until such time.
Members of the board, would someone like to make a motion to postpone item number 5 to allow employee 2205 to exercise his right to a Laudermill hearing?
Madam Chair, I'll make the motion of number 5, the discussion and/or action regarding the merits of the workforce reorganization that would result in elimination of the current Human Resource Director/General Counsel position.
Support.
Motion by Smith, trustee Smith, supported by trustee Oliver, to postpone item number 5 on the agenda to, until further notice. At this time, there's no other items on the agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Just one quick thing. Again.
All in favor?
Oh, yes.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? That motion carries. Thank you.
Just one quick thing before we adjourned. Again, I don't want to go back into this, but I want to personally thank the staff, the employees, for, again, being kind to every person that come in here, regardless of what was going on, and not going out to tell everybody how bad everything was, but they told the right people. And again, thank you. I'm sorry this happened, but we have a great staff here, and I'll be the first to admit that. That's it. That's all I got.
I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by trustee Oliver.
Support.
Supported by trustee Smith to adjourn, and this meeting is adjourned at 8:15.